Only he was screaming? Like a maniac.
The more I do these videos, the more I begin to feel like a fetus because I just learned that I was 3.5 years old when Hoodwinked was released. Yet somehow I vividly remember this movie. As a kid, I really enjoyed this movie, and it was played on the Cartoon Network quite frequently around the year 2008, which is why I think I can remember this movie at all. That being said, even as a 6 or 7 year old kid, this movie always looked like it was animated in quite an odd way. I mean, obviously I didn't understand the nuances of animation and the fact that this movie had a budget that's estimated to be as low as $8 million. Though I always thought it was weird that a movie like Toy Story that came out 10 years prior looked considerably better than this movie. But now that I'm 20 and I'm considerably cooler and more swag, I understand that this movie looks weird because it was animated entirely in Maya, which at the time was a relatively new software, but then again, so was the entire 3D animation industry. Though it sure didn't help that almost none of the animators for this movie had any prior experience in 3D animation. This movie basically served as a 3D animation training course for these guys. To get around the fact that they knew that they weren't going to be able to match the quality of larger and more experienced companies, they had to get pretty creative with other aspects of the animation as well to make this movie stick out. A large example of this is that this movie tries to maintain a more realistic art style. According to the wiki, they rubbed dirt into the colors to obtain this effect, but I'm not enough of an artist to speak on whether or not they actually succeeded at that. I'm not versed in color theory and whatnot. But let's step back to basics here for a second. Hoodwinked was released on December 16th, 2005 in California only, and then released to the rest of the United States on January 13th, 2006. The movie was made on a relatively tiny budget of only $8 million, or roughly $12 million in today's money. Jesus, I can't even imagine this movie being made on a budget that small, largely because of the cast of this movie just being pretty impressive. Or maybe that's just by today's standards. Because I was literally 3 years old when this movie came out, I can't tell you how popular the cast was at the time, but having Anne Hathaway and Patrick Warburton had to be like 10% of this movie's budget. I mean, Tara Strong and Tom Kenny are also in this movie, although in very, very minor appearances. But I am still curious about what percentage of the budget of this movie went to the voice cast versus the animation. That being said, the budget of this movie has also been projected to be as high as $15 million, but given the fact that the source that says this movie's budget was only $8 million was literally the director of the actual movie, I'm gonna choose to believe that source. Hoodwinked went on to make a little over $110 million at the box office, which is over 13 times the lowest estimated budget for this movie, which is actually f***ing insane. That being said, it isn't exactly super difficult to make 13 times your budget when your movie cost 28 pennies and a dry hand job to make. If you're wondering why this movie had such a low budget, it's because it was funded almost entirely by one guy who just really wanted to make a movie. Maurice Carnbar, in essence, is just a dude who really wanted to make an animated film. So when Blue Yonder Productions pitched the idea of making a movie to him, he was pretty much immediately on board with them. And that's kind of based. Bro just kind of said, "F it, we ball," and rolled the dice on a whole ass animated feature-length film. Also, we need to talk about the fact that this movie was distributed by the Weinstein Company. I don't really want to talk about how weird of a dude Harvey Weinstein is, but it is really weird in retrospect to learn that he's responsible for putting this movie in front of my young and impressionable childhood mind. So I will now be blaming every single one of my character flaws on Harvey Weinstein, no matter how insignificant. Anyway, I think we've now all become versed enough in the Hoodwinked lore to really dig our teeth in and enjoy this movie. Although Hoodwinked leaves quite a bit to be desired from an animation standpoint, this movie stands out because of its ability to defy the expectations of the viewer. The movie starts out with the classic Little Red Riding Hood story, but quickly takes an odd turn. But real quick, let's go ahead and talk about the animation while we're here. It's important to remember that this is 2005, but to me, the graphical quality really isn't the issue here. It's more about the fact that the movements of the characters aren't really fluid. Characters will start and stop moving on a single frame. For any of you who know the 12 principles of animation, it's pretty obvious which one of the 12 commandments they're breaking by doing this. Other than that, I kinda like the art style of this movie. It's obviously not fantastic, but when I look back on it, I honestly can't say that it doesn't add any charm to the experience. Even watching this 18 years later, I still identify this movie with its somewhat plasticky art style. Either way, after this huge himbo bursts through the wall, we get into what makes this movie so amazing. Hoodwinked is a version of Little Red Riding Hood that views itself through the lens of a police procedural. The first character we're introduced to is Chief Grizzly, voiced by Exhibit. For those of you younger than 30, he was a 2000s hip-hop artist with a relatively large following at the time. Chief Grizzly is your classic hard-ass donut and coffee-loving cop, except he's a bear this time. Next is Detective Bill Stork, played by Anthony Anderson. He's the good cop of Good Cop, Bad Cop, but not really because he's the good cop, just because he's kind of stupid. We get a lineup of all of the suspects, and Chief Grizzly, being your average American law enforcement officer, is hasty to arrest everyone in the room. However, Detective Nikki Flippers puts a quick stop to this utter lack of due process. Nikki Flippers is voiced by David Olgen Steers, and is kind of like if the band of singing frogs from Meet the Robinsons had a falling out and went their separate ways. Because Nikki isn't a megalomaniac, he says it's important that they make sure they evaluate all sides of the story before making any arrests. Also, this movie does cutaway gags. I'm not gonna explain that to you, I'll just let you guess what that was about. The first character to get interviewed is Little Red Riding Hood, voiced by Anne Hathaway. She begins her side of the story saying she was simply making deliveries to all of the woodland creatures in the forest. This movie is also kind of a quasi-musical, and there's a song here, but it's not terrible, nor does the music really take a forefront in this movie. We're introduced to this character, who is Red's best friend, named Boingo, voiced by Andy Dick. He's a little bit fruity in my opinion, but Boingo gives us some important exposition that there's a goodie bandit on the loose. The goodie bandit is stealing all the recipes in the woods, making it impossible for any of the creatures to make a living. You'd think that this movie took place in 2020 because every small business in the woods is going out of business permanently. After learning this information, Little Red decides to check on our grandmother, Granny Puckett, voiced by Glenn Close. Red calls Granny for advice, but she doesn't have much to offer Red, and simply insists that Red needs to keep Granny's recipe book secret and safe. Also, Red just kills this bird in a cutaway gag, so that's concerning. After hearing some glass shatter, Red goes to find a quaint little note left in her bakery. At this point, she does the exact thing that her grandmother told her not to do, not but 20 seconds after her grandmother told her not to do it. So Red takes it upon herself to take the recipe book all the way up the mountain by herself. This is something that Nikki Flippers also finds to be quite odd as well. But don't worry, it's not as far as it seems because all of the woodland creatures decided to install a cable car. You know, I don't really know what's weirder, the fact that they installed a cable car here or the fact that it's being operated by a homosexual rabbit. That being said, it's not exactly surprising that a cable car built by bears, storks, and rabbits isn't exactly up to industrial code, and the doors fly open, causing Red to fall to her impending doom. But it does need to be noted that Boingo seems to be more upset about the goodies falling out of the car than the fact that Red will more likely than not die from this fall. I mean, obviously this is a movie, so she doesn't die because the trees happen to be made out of rubber. This is where we're introduced to my favorite character, and pretty much the only reason I decided to make this video, the Big Bad Wolf, voiced by Patrick Warburton. He is such a good voice actor, and his delivery is what makes Wolf such a great character.
Quite a bit of falling he did just now.
Oh, you saw that.
Yeah, gravity's working.
After grilling Red for answers that she's not willing to give up, he gets a little fed up and decides to take this opportunity to jump scare her. She runs away and also sprays him with wolf away spray, which is probably racist in this universe. But she uses her loose copyright connections to Disney and gets these tiny birds to trick the wolf into falling downstream. After making her way out of Compton, we're introduced to this living meme of a character. His name is Japheth the Goat, voiced by Benji Geither. He has to sing everything because he was cursed by a witch 37 years ago. Japheth lets Red use his phone so that she can call Granny, and although it's not exactly clear what she's doing, it's safe to assume she's not at home as she's dressed for the Winter Olympics and screaming like a black man who just saw a magic trick. Red asks Japheth to help her down the mountain, where we get this absolute banger of a song where Japheth sings about being prepared with many types of horns. This song is adequately titled Be Prepared. Fun fact, the soundtrack for this movie isn't available for streaming due to legal disputes. It's on iTunes and can be purchased for $9.99, but it's not available anywhere else except for a physical CD, which can be purchased for a reasonable sum. The important part of this song, however, is that Japheth uses these minecarts to help Red get where she needs to go. After an avalanche comes seemingly out of nowhere, Red and Japheth are launched into the air, where an apparition of Granny tells Red that she actually possesses the ability to fly. And don't worry, Japheth is fine because he is literally the goat and made sure to come prepared. Red floats all the way to Granny's house, and now we're officially caught up to the start of the movie. But Red now has to explain it to Nikki Flippers, which causes some funny little silly gags.
No, not yet.
Red finishes telling her side of the story, and now we get to hear Wolf's side of the story. This is where we learn in this universe that the big bad wolf is actually the big bad reporter. You know, I think I liked him more when he just ate children. Wolf is an investigative journalist who has been looking into the Goody Bandit for the last 6 months. His story begins not long after Little Red leaves the bakery with the recipe book. This part isn't even important, but while undercover as a health inspector, Wolf says to this guy that his name is Rick Shaw and that he just flew in from Japan, and I think that that is a very underrated joke. Wolf is suspicious of Red because she has more connections to the baked good industry than anyone else in the woods. Just then, we're introduced to my second favorite character named Twitchy, voiced by Corey Edwards. Twitchy's mom was taking cocaine while she was pregnant with him, which permanently altered his biology, making him have no in-between frames and a very high-pitched voice.
Color or black and white?
Doesn't matter.
Flash!
You put that away.
Next, we meet one of Wolf's informants, Woolworth. Woolworth needs to be well compensated for his information, but he gives good information and lets Wolf know about the fact that Red works for Granny and that Red will be on the cable car, which is where our stories get caught up with each other. I actually really enjoy these fun explanations for the things that Red experiences as odd, just being normal things to the wolf. The forest feels dark to Red because she fell out of a tram car and got her eyes dilated by Twitchy. He's seemingly abnormally fast because he took a taxi cab to catch up with her. It's also interesting because Red left out the part where she beat his ass to make herself look better, but he didn't leave out the part where he got his ass beat because he believes in journalistic integrity. It makes a lot of sense for both of their stories. After being washed down the river, Wolf and Twitchy run into Boingo, who gives them directions to Granny's house. Seriously, Wolf has all of the best dialogue in this movie.
Why couldn't I write movie reviews?
Wolf and Twitchy find their way out of this cave and into the minecarts from Red's story. After managing to hijack a minecart, they begin to make their way down the mountain toward Granny's house. You can also see Red and hear her screaming for a split second in this scene. And I intentionally waited till now to say it, but you can also see Wolf during Red's part of the story too. So I appreciate that this movie has a consistent timeline and continuity throughout it. This was 100% my favorite part of the movie as a kid.
What kind of candles are those?
Bean of the
Corey Edwards and Patrick Warburton are clearly having a lot of fun with their roles. This little side quest is also what caused the railroad to be destroyed when Red and Japheth tried to use it in Red's story. Okay, so remember how I said that I liked that this movie had a consistent timeline? Well, I kinda lied when I said that because how did Wolf get to Granny's first? Like, not only did Red jump what seemed to be hundreds of feet in the air and then gracefully glide to her destination, but Wolf and Twitchy already stopped their cart. Assuming that Wolf and Twitchy even started their minecart again, it's hard to believe that they would have reached Granny's house first, because Red 100% has the speed advantage at this point. After arriving inside the house, Wolf uses merchandise that Granny has lying around to make a disguise. And that's where Wolf's story ends. But the detectives still begin to question how the hash-slinging slasher plays into this, and why Granny was rigged for the world's most restrictive shibari contest. So the police begin the interview for Kirk the Woodsman, voiced by Jim Belushi. Our story begins with Kirk auditioning for a commercial for Paul's Bunyan Foot Cream. The commercial is directed by Jimmy Lizard, who essentially tells Kirk that he sucks and then sends him on his way. After auditioning for the commercial, Kirk returns to his day job as a schnitzel truck driver, and holy what the is that killer with fire, oh my god! While Kirk was singing and dancing with these little nightmares, his schnitzel truck got. This is because he parked in the Detroit part of the forest. Boingo shows up here but doesn't have time to do much of anything before Schnitzel gets a call back from the commercial director. The director tells Kirk that he liked his energy, but he needs him to understand what it truly means to be a woodsman. Kirk seems to be having performance issues, as it is his first time holding an axe. But after reading a book on how to chop wood, Kirk seemingly gets the hang of it. However, Kirk feels that he needs one last challenge to prove that he truly is a woodsman, so he attempts to chop down this massive tree. This explains where Kirk was while Red was committing assault and while Wolf was violating the Federal Explosives Act of 1917. Kirk hears a scream at Granny's house and goes to check it out, but not before the tree that he very inefficiently chopped down falls over, launching him through the window, wrapping up his story in a neat and ultimately unimportant little bow. So that leaves Granny as last on the chopping block to explain her story. Unfortunately for Red, Granny keeps a lot of secrets that are about to come out in this story. This reminds me of all of those Merge Mansion advertisements that TikTok was absolutely losing their shit about last year. In this universe, Granny is a professional at extreme sports and a major adrenaline junkie. Granny's expedition for today is that she'll be attending the Extreme Dream skiing competition. But the most shocking revelation that we learn from all of this is that Granny is actually black.
What's happening? What up, my homies?
And in case that you think that homies are white, I'd like to remind you of what Jordan Peele once said.
Nah, homies are black.
The competition is going to be tight, as Granny now has to worry about these, and I quote, player haters. The player haters will also be skiing down the mountain at the same time and are apparently aggressively violent. Granny also signs an autograph for Boingo before getting ready to ski down the mountain. These guys will be skiing down the mountain at the same time as Granny and her group. After the race begins, we quickly learn that the player haters are more violent than a Discord user learning the age of consent laws.
What? No, dude!
A while into their altercation, the lead player hater manages to get Granny in a state of disadvantage. But because Granny is awesome, she still manages to get some information out of him before Big and Beefy drops Granny faster than the Oscars, dropping Will Smith in 2022.
You tell me this instant!
We were hired by the bandit!
This guy may have just been an accessory to like 5 murders, but at least he respects his elders. Kinda. Granny uses nothing but stone cold badassery to get back up the mountain, and there is clearly no system of referees or any kind of legal representation present at this event, because on top of the 4 assaults and 1 attempted murder, Granny also uses these explosives, which I'm sure were obtained very legally, to cause the avalanche that takes place during the Be Prepared scene. Granny must be close friends with Japheth because she came prepared and packed a parachute under her ski uniform. This explains how she manifested herself as an omnipotent god to Red. Then she floats all the way to the house, landing in the chimney slightly before Wolf and Twitchy arrive. Although her parachute gets caught in the fan, tying her up and locking her in the closet, which actually reminds me of this really fun game that me and my siblings used to play as a kid. Damn, what was it called again? Yeah, that's it. That's it. Good times. Times. Granny then beats Twitchy to death to open the door, and we're all caught up to speed. But the revelation that Granny has been lying to Red causes them to have a falling out, and the detectives take a quick leave so they can air out all of their personal problems. This all causes Red to feel very hurt, taking off the hood that Granny made her in an act of sadness. So what do we call her now? Little Riding? I mean, she still has her bike. So yeah, I'll just call her that. There's also a song here called Red is Blue, and obviously I can't play it for legal reasons, but the lyrics literally go, red is blue, that doesn't make much sense, but red is blue. And I like that they acknowledge how stupid the song is in the song itself. This entire scene is so f***ing campy. I mean, listen to this line during the flashback scene that Red is having.
If there are 2 things your granny doesn't do, it's lie and play extreme sports.
The song that's playing is literally just verbally explaining everything that Red is going through. I love this entire sequence so much. Just after this scene, someone wearing Red's hood steals the goodie basket. It's obviously not Red, because if it was Red, then the movie would just tell us that. Back at the interrogation though, Nikki Flippers is still trying to figure out who is the main villain of the story. But during this, they realize that both Red and the recipes have gone missing. But Nikki isn't so easily convinced that Red is the goodie bandit because she has nothing to gain from this. Nikki pieces together that the only common thread in all of the stories is Boingo the bunny, and he sets out with the police to go track him down. I know that they've exonerated these guys of any real suspicion, but it feels weird to leave 4 of your 6 previous prime suspects in a room alone. The player haters renovated Kirk's Snitchel truck into... I don't know what this is, but it goes up mountains now. I mean, it did that before, but now it looks evil while doing it, which I think is what really matters. Wolf sends Twitchy to go stop the cops and let them know that they're going the wrong way and that the true culprits are headed up the mountain. But to give Twitchy the extra boost of speed and energy that he needs, Wolf gives Twitchy a cup of coffee that probably weighs more than Twitchy himself.
What have I done?
Boingo makes it to the end of the cable car line and mansplains his evil motivations to Dolph, which Little Riding overhears. Also, Little Riding calls Boingo Bad Bunny, and for a split second, I swear she was referencing the 2020s Puerto Rican hip-hop artist, but then I remembered that this movie came out in 2005. So now it is my personal headcanon that Bad Bunny got his name because he is just a really big fan of Hoodwinked. This is where we get an amazing fight scene that puts that trash from Kung Fu Panda to shame. I mean, for a team of animators that had literally never animated in 3D before, this honestly turned out pretty good, and I'd feel bad if I did nothing but trash on it. Boingo manages to lay out Little Riding faster than Nate Robinson got knocked out by Jake Paul, and Dolph ties her up. Boingo also makes fun of Keith's name here for a little bit.
Darn it, change your name, please. That's not scary, and I'm embarrassed to say it. Oh,
Watch out for Keith.
Yeah, that's probably why the happy face killer didn't go by his real name. Boingo sings a short little song about his evil plans and then literally explains his evil plans in a 3-phase program. Wow, this nigga really likes to talk about his evil plans. His plan is to add something called boingonium to all the recipes that he's stolen thus far. This is a super addictive drug that will make children constantly desire to eat his sweet treats. I think I'd just prefer he hand out bags of heroin, to be honest with you. Boingo loads Red up on the Explosion Express, and at the same time, Granny and the gang show up. Boingo also says the thing.
You've been hoodwinked, baby.
So that's kinda cool, I guess. You know what? I'm just gonna say it. Hoodwinked is a creative ass name for this movie, and if I came up with it, I would be jerking myself off about it to this damn day. Granny begins to hatch a plan to take down Dolph, but because this movie was written in 2005, this happens.
He's standing right behind me, isn't he?
You know what? I'll give them a pass this time. I feel like this trope wasn't too dated 18 years ago, but you're on thin ice. But they tussle with Dolph, and we switch to the next scene where Twitchy causes a 3-way collision. But because Twitchy is hopped up on methamphetamines, he can't properly explain to the officers what he's saying. Kirk ends up disguising himself as Dolph, but he's kind of a wreck, so Wolf takes over pretending to be a building inspector to distract Boingo so that Granny can sneak around the evil lair. But after Granny gets spotted by Boingo, the jig is up and she uses her extreme sports skills to put the pose on Boingo's henchmen. But while everyone is distracted, Boingo flips the switch to Sunset Little Riding. Thankfully though, friction doesn't exist in this universe, and Granny uses a muffin pan to try and catch up to Little Red. The player haters also use their snowboards to try and catch up to Granny as well. The officers are finally able to decipher Twitchy's nonsensical speaking, but at the same time they notice the train car full of explosives coming right at them. Red manages to wiggle herself free and crawl around the train car. At the same time, Granny comes to the rescue just in time and causes ecological damage to the environment that will take about a decade to recover from. And now that Little Red Riding Hood's namesake has been restored, she uses it to float off into the sky away from the danger that isn't far behind them. The player haters also skedaddle themselves right into police custody. You guys like that wordplay? God damn it. Granny and Little Red land safely on the ground and they reconcile their differences. Wolf and Kirk make it back down the mountain and cause about $20,000 in property damage, but it's fine because they saved the day. And everyone knows after you stop one crime, you're allowed to commit as many as you want for the next 24 to 36 hours. The next morning, we find our main characters at a muffin stand, and this isn't technically important, but it's funny so I'm mentioning it, but Japheth now works as the delivery goat for Red and Granny. The movie ends with Detective Flippers hiring the gang to work for him at Happily Ever After Agency to work as spies, detectives, and investigators. This reminds me of the terrifying yet exciting fact that this movie got a sequel. I remember liking Hoodwinked, but honestly, I liked it a lot more watching it now than I did however many years ago. Okay, the first thing we need to talk about is this movie's art and animation style, because although it's intentional, it doesn't make this movie any better of a watching experience. Apparently the directors wanted this movie to have more of a stop motion feel, which is why the characters start and stop moving on a dime sometimes, but it just ends up looking very jarring. In fact, my mind would have never have even made that connection had I not literally been researching the movie. I swear doing this has to go against like 3 of the 12 basic principles of animation, and it really doesn't look good. The art style. You know, honestly, I don't hate it. Is it that much fun to look at? No, not at all. I mean, Kirk the Woodsman notably looks really odd because his body parts seem to be fighting for space, and I think that's because they had to model his body in a way that it wouldn't overlap and clip into itself. But I do think that the art style serves the purpose of the movie really well. The movie is supposed to be surreal and gritty. I mean, the first 2 acts of this movie take place during a police investigation. It makes sense. I do also think that they did pretty well with the camera work in this movie. The thing about animation, and especially 3D animation, is you're not limited by what a camera can and cannot capture. You can do whatever you want from wherever you want to capture it, and I think they do a good job of showing that off in this movie. Anyone who has touched 3D animation will let you know that the camera is one of the most annoying things to deal with through the entire process, and I'm sure it was only worse in 2005, so I think they did as well as they possibly could have. Other than that, I have pretty much nothing else to complain about. I actually really like the story. It makes a lot of sense. The elements of Boingo being a a bad guy are never really hidden from the audience, but it makes a lot of sense that none of them would have realized that he was evil based on their singular short interactions that they had with him. I also like that the individual stories weave together in really consistent and convincing ways. The only issue that I have is that Red seriously shouldn't have made it to the house after Wolf. She was traveling considerably faster than he was. Other than that, the story itself ties itself together really well. I don't particularly care for the fact that Kirk is really only there to pad out runtime. Don't get me wrong, Kirk is funny, I like his story, but he doesn't really do pretty much anything in the movie at all. He serves to be just an extra story that's told. He also has the shortest story, running for a little under 10 minutes, compared to everyone else's stories taking 15 to 20 minutes. You could legit remove him from the movie and you would largely end up with the same experience. I mean, even in the third act, he doesn't do anything that Wolf couldn't have done by himself. Wolf ended up having to be the one to distract Boingo because Kirk ended up freezing in the moment. That all being said, I still do largely like the story for this movie, even if it is pretty thin. I mean, it's basically just, here's why we're innocent, and oh hey, this bunny is here, he must be the bad guy. And then the movie ends like 15 minutes after that. Like seriously, the third act feels really short. I mean, Granny and Red have their falling out and then they make up in literally the next interaction that they have with each other. The music in this movie is a lot of fun. There aren't too many songs, even though this movie describes itself as a musical. 2 of the 3 songs in this movie that are sung by actual characters in the movie are sung in the first 15 minutes of the movie. And the third song being the Boingo song that is 7 minutes before the movie ends and is in 2 parts that are about 45 seconds each. That being said, they're all good songs, there just aren't really enough of them to make me say that the movie needed songs at all. Like, they're fun, but I'd say we could entirely ditch the first one. Be Prepared and Top of the Woods were a lot of fun, but Great Big World is kind of just there, in my opinion. The voice cast for this movie absolutely killed it. Every single one of the lines in this movie is delivered perfectly. Everyone in this movie was just cast so perfectly and everyone gave amazing performances. I could just listen to this movie and I'd still have a good time because this movie is just like 80% silly being said. So rounding it all out, I'm gonna give Hoodwinked a 7 out of 10 on the critical score. I wanted to give it higher, but a lot of the flaws I mentioned just can't be ignored. Even the nostalgia goggles that I'm wearing aren't enough for me to ignore a lot of what I talked about. It's a great film, but the things that this movie does well are dragged down by the things that this movie does poorly. That being said, for the fun score, I'm giving this movie a 10 out of 10. I find the animation to be a little distracting at times, but at the same time, it's a lot of this movie's charm and what makes it so fun. Patrick Warburton also killed it as Wolf. I loved his performance so much that it's single-handedly what carries this movie from a 9 out of 10 to a 10 out of 10. This movie is ridiculous, but it's consistent and it's constantly funny. I'd highly recommend you give this movie a watch if you have 75 free minutes. Unfortunately, the hard part is watching the movie because it can't actually be streamed anywhere, likely due to the legal problems caused by this movie being distributed by the Weinstein Company. But I'll see if I can find some links to rent or buy the movie and I'll leave them in the description below. I hope you guys enjoyed this week's video. Remember to like and subscribe to help me hit 50,000 subscribers and we can finally do the Nintendo Switch giveaway. I don't know why, but I really want to give away a Nintendo Switch. Also check out my socials, the links are in the description, and join the Discord. Next week's video, I'm finally getting around to doing the highly requested Zombies 2 video, where we get to learn about colonialism, or at least that's according to the top comment on my Zombies 1 video, and I'm not gonna question it because why would they lie to me on the internet? Nathan, Kennedy, Nixie, and I are all gonna go make Fruit Loop necklaces now. Okay, wow, that seems a little unnecessary. No, I'm just saying. Okay, Kennedy seems to be in a bad mood, so I'm gonna go ahead and end the video here before he says anything that will get it demonetized. No!